Order, order. Hello and welcome to Reporters Without Orders, where we talk about what made news, what didn't, and some things that absolutely shouldn't have. This week I'm joined by my colleagues Tanishka and Laasya. Both of them have actually spent the week covering cases of similar undertones. Both have covered cases of communal violence. Laasya, you were at Jahangirpuri, right?
Yes.
And Tanishka, you went to look at the aftermath of the violence that had broken out last year in Gurgaon for the Namaz. And this was called the Namaz row at that point. Right. So I want to start by asking Laasya. So actually, Laasya, you're based out of Tamil Nadu. You've joined us here now in Delhi. We were just talking before this, and you were saying this was almost your first time experiencing the kind of scene that you did at Jahangirpuri. So can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, what was different for you? Why was it so shocking for you?
So, such incidents of communal violence are not very common in Chennai. The last I would remember is some protest against CAA, which was also not it did not go for many days, and I had not covered it at that point of time. So this is actually my first time covering communal violence. So in a span of 1 week, I covered two issues: one in JNU, and then second one in Jahangirpuri.
So I'm curious because I'm also from Kerala, and when I had first come, it was also really shocking for me to see how divisive it was, or how in the face the differences are. What about you, Tanishka? When you started, was it something you felt was really shocking and you'd never experienced in life, or were you more used to the kind of news and you knew this was more a reality these days?
I think over the last few months and even years, it's all been sort of building up. So it's never been a shock when something happens. Even in Delhi and Jahangirpuri, I think it was about, I don't want to say about time, but the way that, especially in the last 2 weeks, the instances of communal violences were occurring across the country. You see the signs before it comes. So I don't think any of this was a shock as such. But of course, actually being there and covering the issues, it is different than just reading about it.
Of course. And what about when you covered the Gurgaon Namaz row? Do you think that, and this is for both of you, I'm kind of curious, we've been hearing a lot of Muslim journalists getting targeted. We saw this happen at the Hindu Mahapanchayat as well. So when you all go on ground, and I've also been on ground with regards to our identity, do you think that it helps you earn the trust of, say, Hindu protesters? Does the conversation change because of identity? Have you noticed that before and during your coverage of communal violence?
I think for me, 100%, not this particular time I went to report, but when I went last year to cover the Gurgaon Namaz issue, I think that's when I realized the privilege that comes with a bindi, or with your name. I remember I was covering this one time I went in the aftermath of a Namaz protest, and there were just a bunch of protesters who were right-wing local activists. So I had finished speaking to them, and the other journalist was speaking to them, and I could hear the conversation. He did tell his name, and he was a Muslim. And after a point in the conversation, it started getting a bit heated, and they sort of started telling him that "Aap log to ye karte ho, you guys do this, we don't do this." They made it very personal. And I just went a little closer because I almost felt afraid for him, because you don't know the way things can get heated up. So that's when it really hit me that it's so different. I didn't have to worry about things like this, because when you go as a woman, you worry about other things. But this is your identity ends up shielding you in a way. So, yeah.
What about you, Laasya? Even though it's been your first few experiences, have you ever seen or experienced that?
I haven't experienced any of it, but my major issues on the field is not knowing Hindi. I'm not very fluent with the language, though I can understand. So I had a tough time convincing people to talk to me. Like, there are a few skills. I'm good at convincing is what I feel. But when I have to translate it to Hindi, by the time I translate it to Hindi in my head and then talk to them, they're gone or they're not convinced. So that was a major problem I faced. So
Do you felt like people trusted you less with their stories because you couldn't speak their language?
yes, also that. So they were not willing to talk to me because I was not speaking their language.
Right. So I want to start by asking you, Laasya, do you, when you went to Jahangirpuri, what did you see? And this is a developing story. In fact, our colleague Shivangi is there on ground today, and she's covering the story of the demolitions that have just begun. Even though the Supreme Court has asked for a status quo, it hasn't stopped until the written order arrives. So you will be seeing Shivangi's text piece by the time this podcast is out. But I want to start by asking you, when you and Shivangi went on the 17th, right? What were the scenes that you saw?
So when we went to the spot on Sunday morning, the first sight that shocked me was there were saffron flags inside the mosque, and something that was in the face was a reporter of a mainstream TV channel. She was on the ground. She was doing, she was giving a piece to camera, and she did not want the camera person to focus on the mosque or to, cover the flags which were inside the mosque. So I found it, little amusing. I haven't, even though such instances I haven't noticed in the south till now. So the second thing was CRPF personnel were stationed in Jahangirpuri by then. There were more than 60 CRPF personnel, and there were hundreds of police from all the districts of Delhi. And people, the locality was barricaded, and people were not allowed. There was tension in the air. Muslims were very agitated that they feel that their arrests were made from the Muslim families and not from the Hindu families, even though they claim both of them are reasons for it. But they say that it was the Hindus that initiated the clash.
So let's talk about that. I mean, what exactly happened in Jahangirpuri?
So on Shobha Yatra was held on Sunday. Police claim that it is a traditional route they take. Even Muslims said that this has happened many times. The Shobha Yatras and all these festivals keep happening. So on Sunday morning there was a procession at 9 o'clock, and there was another one at 3 o'clock, and there was a bike rally at 3 o'clock, and there was another one at 4:30 or so. So the locals are saying that the procession was aggressive from the start. There were weapons, although now although they argue that it is that part of the tradition, but I don't understand how. I haven't seen such things also. Yeah, there were swords, baseball bats, and guns also. We have the video evidences of all of it. So, and it was a very aggressive procession from the start. What changed in the 4:30 procession was, so it reached the Jumma Masjid, the mosque, at 6 o'clock. And then two Hindu men tried to plant saffron flags inside, near the entrance of the gate.
We saw that.
No, but more than 10 people, Hindus included, said that it was the case. And but the police, the commissioner said it was not the case. So after this, there were verbal exchanges between both the groups, and there was stone pelting also. Police tried to calm the situation, but they did not. It did not happen. So,
is there any idea, or has it now become that situation where it is almost impossible to trace what started the violence? Like, what exactly triggered? Was it stone pelting from within the mosque? Was it the procession itself and the violent calls? Like, we've seen some instances of communal violence where there was really triggering music that sort of instigated the violence as well. So is there something here where we're able to pinpoint, okay, this is the incident that sort of initiated this?
As of now, no. There's multiple accounts from many sources. The police version is different from what the Hindus are saying and what the locals, the neutral voices are also saying. But as much as I could understand, it started, the whole idea of the procession was violent from the start. And stone pelting did happen from both the sides. The Muslims I spoke to said they started it, and we had to defend ourselves. We were in the mosque to pray. Why do you think we would have stones inside the mosque? We did not have any of it. So we had to defend. So whatever stones fell on us, we threw it back on them in order to defend. So there are also, we haven't yet verified the independent sources like the CCTV footage also, which is currently with the police. So we have to wait for the investigation to be completed.
So I'm curious, when you say the idea of the protest was violent from the start, you mean the carrying of these swords and the guns that were used, right?
And the slogans that says, if you are in Hindustan, you have to say Jai Shri Ram. You have to chant Jai Shri Ram.
It's interesting and funny that they say that, because I remember during the farmers' protest, when there were visuals of the farmers defending themselves with their swords and their kripan, which they actually can legally carry with them. There was this entire online Hindu brigade which came up, and Hindutva brigade which came up and then said that, this is so violent and how can you have weapons like this. And there was one particular instance where the police had there was a clash between the farmers and the police at Singhu border, and there was a clear visual of this guy taking out his sword, and the Hindutva brigade online had just gone completely crazy, saying this is so violent, how can you carry a weapon? And it's interesting that in a situation like this, they're justifying their own weapons as something that you just do during a
But
festival.
another point that has no justification is the procession was not allowed. There was no permission granted to carry out the procession. But why didn't the police, who were part of the crowd, who were there in the procession, did not foresee it?
So this is also interesting, right? Because I remember even the Hindu Mahapanchayat had not gotten permission to hold that event at the Burari ground, but they managed to, and then no action was really taken. Or I think a civil case was filed on them, which doesn't amount to anything. So we are also seeing these instances of violence happening so much in the last 2 weeks. We were discussing it in the meeting as well yesterday. There's been an increase because festivals are happening at the same time, and the polarization seems to have increased. Like Ramzan has fallen at a time when what Ram Navami is happening, and a lot of other things are happening. So this seems to be a lot of tension in the air in general in the country right now, which is kind of sad, because I remember my parents and grandparents always talking about like a space where everything could happen together, right? So I want to talk, you went to go back to look at a story that had actually happened last October. Can you tell us what it was and why you chose to go back to it now?
Yeah. So October to December of last year, there were these constant agitations in different sectors of Gurgaon against open namaz being conducted on spots that were designated by the administration a few years ago. So I think we all saw that in the news. I covered it multiple times, and it made headlines for a lot of time. And it was a very visual agitation, It also made for good photos or good press in the way that you want to know what's happening. The way that they would come with the loudspeakers and their slogans, and at the same time, at some places, namaz was still happening. So it was, the contrast was very hard to look away from. So this just stopped making news over the last few months after the chief minister said that open namaz will not be tolerated in public places. So after that, the Hindutva sort of got what they wanted. The Hindutwas are the local leaders who were protesting against it. And so for 3-4 months, there was like absolutely no update. And I was in touch with my sources, but no one was really speaking about what was happening. So I really wanted to revisit, because we may have moved on from that to new issues which are equally important. But it doesn't change what was happening before, because the fight or the resistance was there for a reason. So I really wanted to see what is happening now, If the spots have, in October 2021, the spots to pray were in open places were 37. By the time all this ended, December and beginning of Jan, this had reduced to 6. So that's a large, that's, quite you can see it in the numbers. Yeah. And there are a lot of Muslims there, around 5 lakh Muslims. So where are they going to pray? And how has this really changed their lives in a way, Because once, even the media, the way that we play a role in bringing things to light, it also sort of, I feel like we also, in a way, end up encouraging some of these things, because the more it comes in the news, the more whatever you're thinking, you're sort of, yeah, exactly. And more people get encouraged, I have been thinking over the past few weeks that what is the best way for us to go forward in such issues? Even in the last 2 weeks, all the issues that are happening, how do we cover it in a way that does not encourage others that, hey, if this is happening in Delhi, this can happen in Bombay too, So I wanted to see what are the after effects, where are people praying, and how have their lives changed, just if, like, for a Muslim person and a Hindu person who are neighbors and earlier didn't really have clashes, after the clashes after the clashes begin and things get a little messy, how are they moving forward? So It was.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are the compromises made by Muslims because there are there are less designated spaces
Yeah.
for open namaz?
So I think there are a number of them. Someone I spoke to said that he has stopped going for Jumma Namaz on on Fridays, and he just skips work every third Friday to pray at home instead, because there are no closed mosques or open spaces near his office. The closest mosque is an hour away, and so he would do it every third Friday, because I think that is a limit in the religion text that says that
You
after
cannot
this-
keep away
yeah,
for so
yeah.
long. Yeah.
So that is one. A lot of them spoke about wanting to leave the city, or people were telling me about people they know who have left the city. Identity is another thing, because sort of you take in that you'll keep a low persona, and you'll just not let your identity be very obvious and in the face, which is something I noticed even back then when the protests were happening, which is just, I mean, it's ridiculous to think, because your identity plays such a big role,
Yeah.
right, in who you are as a person or how you view the world, and to have to shield it, why should you have to justify or not justify who you are? That's another thing. And the most obvious impact was the decrease in spaces, because now in the existing mosques, it's held, Namaz is held a lot more times than it used to. If it used to happen 2-3 times a day, now it happens 7-8 times a day in the same place to accommodate for the number of people. So there are a lot of problems that are very in the face, and other problems like identity, which are not in the face, but once you explore it, it sort of comes front. So that was something I try to focus on.
So viewers, if you want to listen to the rest of our podcast, you're going to have to go to our website newslaundry.com and go to our podcast section. We have a special podcast player you can listen to it on, or you can also listen to it on Spotify, Stitcher, or Apple Podcast. For the rest of the podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit about something interesting that Tanishka brought up about how even media might be playing a role to further the divisive nature of what's happening on ground, and what we might be able to do as reporters to bridge that gap or not play that role. And obviously, we're going to continue talking about what happened at Jahangirpuri. So if you want to listen to the rest of the podcast, please go to newslaundry.com.
The subscription model is something that keeps Newslaundry afloat, but we need hundreds of thousands of people to completely transform the news ecosystem. So you pay for news, so it serves you. So click on the link with this video, subscribe to Newslaundry and pay to keep news free, और गर्व से कहो मेरे खर्च पर आज़ाद है खबरें.